You can find him on t-shirts, posters, jewelry, dishes. There's even a toaster that will put his face on your bread. And I'm not talking about your favorite pop star. I'm talking about Jesus. Regardless of your religious beliefs or what part of the world you're in, chances are you could pick Jesus out of a lineup. Shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, beard, washboard abs of steel. I feel like there's a CrossFit joke in there somewhere. But this globally recognized version of Jesus didn't come from Bethlehem. This guy's actually a 20th century American. The 1941 Head of Christ painting is the most widely reproduced piece of artwork in world history, making this the most popular Jesus. So what did Jesus actually look like? Well, the earliest drawings of Jesus and his disciples dates back to 235. In the first images, he was too young for facial hair, but the hair on his head was short and curly. And in the 4th century, Jesus starts popping up in Roman catacombs with short dark hair, a beard, and noticeably melanated skin. People have been arguing about Jesus' appearance basically since the beginning of time. The Bible doesn't ever mention Jesus' race, which makes sense. Christianity had to be universal for it to spread, so there was no point in confining him to one race or another. But one of the biggest disputes among theologists had nothing to do with his skin color, but his level of attractiveness. On one hand, a plain and average Jesus would be relatable and non-threatening, but on the other hand, how could a holy savior be anything other than gorgeous? In 2001, the BBC TV series Son of God did a facial reconstruction of Jesus using forensic science. Combined with the early artistic portrayals, ethnic traits, and the fashion of the day, the finished product was a dark-skinned, bearded, short-haired Jesus. So how did Jesus go from looking like a dark-haired Jewish guy to a white blonde guy? Starting in the Middle Ages, that's somewhere around 476, and especially in the Renaissance, artists began depicting Jesus as white, usually with blue eyes and blondish hair. Many speculate that the turn was influenced by Bible verses that use lightness to symbolize purity and darkness for sin and evil. On the surface, white or light equaling good and pure, and black or dark equaling evil and bad seems harmless. But when bias gets put in the mix, things get dicey. Medieval Christians didn't like the idea of Jesus being dark-skinned and dark-haired because that meant he looked Jewish. Spoiler alert, he was Jewish. Because medieval Christians didn't like Jewish people. In fact, they were actually the first to force them into ghettos, complete with special armbands, both of which were later revived by the Nazis in the 1930s. Yikes. That light equals good and dark equals bad idea even carried over into anti-Semitic propaganda. Jewish people were portrayed as dark and menacing with giant noses, darker complexions, and bushy facial hair. And you can't really oppress Jewish people when your own savior looks Jewish. Thus, white Jesus gained more popularity. But the medieval Christians weren't the only ones to use this new and improved white Jesus to justify oppression. Can anyone say colonialism? In the 1600s, Catholic missionaries sprung up all over the New World with plans to convert the indigenous people. This conversion included enslavement, forcing many to abandon their native languages and traditions, genocide, and of course, stealing their land. Again, we see this narrative of dark-skinned people being bad, thus needing to be tamed or killed in order to conform to this good or white standard. Hello, white supremacy. Now here's where things get interesting. During slavery, you see two very different versions of Jesus and Christianity spring up. For pro-slavery Christians, converting slaves to Christianity and getting rid of their heathenistic religions and languages was part of their godly mission. Slave owners used religion as a means of control and persuaded slaves to convert with the promise of heaven and spiritual freedom, not to be confused with freedom. But black slave ministers zeroed in on God freeing the slaves from Egypt. Not to mention, Jesus' persecution, execution, and resurrection is a classic good overcoming evil story. And to the horror of slave owners, many slave rebellions were inspired by that very triumph. And despite these very different versions of being a good Christian, the black church became an incredible pillar of the black community. For slaves who had been separated from their families, the church became a new family and a place of refuge, especially post-Civil War. Heck, the civil rights movement was born in black churches. I'm thinking of a Baptist minister with the initials MLK. Ever heard of him? So what does all this mean? Are we saying that Jesus and Christianity are bad because historically too many people have used it to justify terrible things? Absolutely not. Anything can be twisted and abused, especially religion. But in the same way we try to tackle race and pop culture here, it's important to look at how iconography can also be influenced and shaped for the purpose of oppression. And it's also important to remember that misuse isn't exclusive to any one religion. Today you can see all kinds of depictions of Jesus around the world. There's an Asian version, Native American versions, and tons of artwork with lock-sporting Black Jesus. There's even a Black Jesus TV show. When white oppressive power structures excluded other versions of Jesus' appearance, they were misusing religion to spread discrimination. Now communities across the globe are reclaiming their right to see Jesus however they choose. While a Korean or a Black Jesus might not be historically accurate, just like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, people of color have the right to see themselves in their religion, especially after centuries of being taught and forced to worship a God that doesn't look like them. We aren't saying that white people are wrong for wanting to see a Jesus that looks like them, but that historically, white Jesus has been used to oppress and erase the histories of people of color in a way that Korean Jesus or Black Jesus has not. Honestly, we may never know what Jesus really looked like, but whatever you do, don't get me started on White Santa, because this video is already way too long. So do you have any other examples of historical figures being whitewashed? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next week here on Decoded. In our last vlog, we asked, why do you think stereotypes are true? Here's what you had to say. Oh, Des, it is heartbreaking to hear that you didn't follow your passions just because you didn't want to live up to a stereotype. I hope now maybe you find the confidence to go back and give dancing another try. Oh, Bomi, these comments are breaking my heart. I am so sad to hear that this stereotype had such a profound effect on you, but I'm hoping that by talking about it, we can make more people aware that stereotypes do have real consequences, even the good ones. In our last sketch, we asked, "Now where are you really from?" Here's what you had to say. Be excited. I am not excited to hear that people ask you, "What are you?" What a strange question. I hope that you come up with a good comeback like, "A human being?" Hey Annie K, we actually talked about Asian stereotypes in our last vlog about why people think stereotypes are true, but we are always open to suggestions for topics here on Decoded, so please feel free to leave us some in the comments.